In the small town of Pine Ridge, nestled in the mountains of Colorado, Linda Carter was enjoying peaceful days with her son's family. As the evening sun cast a warm light through the large windows into the living room, Linda watched with joy as her grandson Oliver diligently practiced at the piano. "Oliver, take that part slowly. There's no need to rush," Linda said gently. Oliver nodded with a serious expression. The way his small fingers carefully pressed the piano keys reminded her of her late son, Daniel. Linda had taught piano to local children for over 30 years. Even after retiring, she continued giving special lessons only to Oliver, her only grandchild. Linda's only son Daniel ran a small music store called Carter's Music in the center of town. Besides work, he enjoyed playing with a band he had formed with friends on weekends. His love for music was truly passed down from mother to son. "Mom, it's tea time," Jessica's voice called from the kitchen, and Oliver stopped practicing and left the piano. Jessica was a young woman who had come to town 5 years ago as a freelance graphic designer. She fell in love with Daniel, who was the owner of a music store client, and they married after just 6 months. Soon after, Oliver was born. Linda respected Jessica as the woman my son chose, but honestly, she was sometimes bewildered by her capricious personality. "Show me Grandpa's pictures again," Oliver pleaded while munching on a cookie. Linda took out an old album from the shelf and showed him pictures of Daniel. Oliver called Daniel Grandpa because when he was born, despite Daniel still being young, he had jokingly said, "I'd rather you call me Grandpa than Dad." The nickname stuck, and now for Oliver, his father would forever be Grandpa. Outside the window, it had started to rain. Mountain weather changes quickly. Linda looked up at the sky and was suddenly overcome with an ominous feeling. Daniel was scheduled to return tonight after finishing a live performance in the neighboring town. Mountain roads become slippery in the rain. Even a familiar road requires caution. "It's all right, Mom," Jessica said, sensing her concern. "Daniel always drives carefully." Linda nodded at those words, but anxiety continued to grow in her heart. In the dead of night, the telephone rang. Its ring sounded ominous against the backdrop of heavy rain. Linda, awakened from sleep, answered the phone to find it was the police calling. They told her Daniel's car had plunged off a cliff on the mountain road. Feeling the blood drain from her face, Linda said into the receiver, "I'll head to the hospital right away," but the voice on the other end continued coldly, "I'm sorry, but your son died at the scene." From that day on, the family's life changed completely. Jessica collapsed in tears, and Linda had to suppress her own grief to support her and Oliver. Though little Oliver couldn't fully comprehend his father's death, he keenly sensed the family's sorrow. On the day of the funeral, people from all over town gathered at the small church. Daniel had been loved by the locals. Linda tried to stay strong, but when it came time to say a final farewell to her son's coffin, tears flowed freely. Oliver tightly gripped her hand and said in a small voice, "Grandma, don't cry." At those words, Linda renewed her determination to be strong for her grandson. As time passed, life gradually returned to normal. Linda reopened her piano school, and Jessica took on more freelance work. Oliver spent more time at the piano, beginning to develop the musical talent that was his father's legacy. However, just as they were starting to recover from their sense of loss, Jessica's behavior began to change. She started coming home late at night and increasingly left Oliver's care to Linda. When Linda inquired out of concern, Jessica brushed it off, saying, "I just need a change of pace." One summer evening, Jessica returned home more excited than usual. After dinner, once Oliver was asleep, she handed Linda a glass of wine and sat down in a chair. "Mother-in-law, actually. I've met someone new," Jessica said. Linda couldn't hide her shock at Jessica's words. It hadn't even been a year since Daniel died. "His name is Robert. He runs a real estate company in Denver. Since meeting him, I feel like I can finally look forward again." Linda held her glass and listened in silence. Jessica's face showed a vitality that had been absent for a long time. However, anxiety spread through Linda's heart. She glanced toward Oliver, thinking of her grandson sleeping in his small room. A black luxury car pulled up in front of Linda's house. The man who stepped out of the car was distinguished by his well-groomed gray hair and expensive suit. Robert Harrison, Jessica's new boyfriend. In his hands was a large package, which he offered to Oliver. "So you're Oliver. I've heard about you from your mom," he said. Oliver timidly accepted the package and opened it to find a remote-controlled car. It was a gift that would delight any child, but Robert's eyes weren't smiling. When Oliver thanked him, Robert simply nodded and averted his gaze. "I'm not good with children. Sorry about that." Linda felt uncomfortable at his words. Was this man really thinking about Jessica and Oliver's future? However, Jessica seemed already enthralled by Robert's charm and would dismiss any concerns about his behavior, saying, "Robert is a busy man. Once you get used to him, I'm sure you'll get along." Once a week, Friday night became the night when Jessica went out on dates with Robert. Linda was happy to look after Oliver. The bond between grandmother and grandson deepened, and Oliver's piano skills improved. Meanwhile, Jessica spent less time at Linda's house, and her words to Oliver grew shorter. On a November morning when the first snow fell, Jessica called Linda into the kitchen and, while brewing coffee, began, "I'm getting married to Robert." Linda tried to smile, but her expression froze at Jessica's next words. "But he's hesitant about marrying a woman with children. Especially a boy." "What do you mean?" "Oliver is your son." Linda's voice trembled. Jessica stared out the window and said, "I know. But Robert has promised me a big house and a new life. He's giving me a fresh start." "A fresh start? What about the memories with Daniel? What about Oliver?" Jessica shrugged. "Oliver is attached to you. You could surely." "Jessica, what are you saying?" Linda couldn't contain her indignation. "Oliver is your child. He needs his mother." From that day on, the relationship between Jessica and Linda grew cold. Jessica was increasingly absent from home, and Oliver, sensing this, began to show signs of anxiety. "What's wrong with Mom?" Oliver would ask in a small voice, and Linda would cover for Jessica, saying, "Mom's just busy with work," but in her heart, she feared that Jessica might truly leave Oliver behind. On a Saturday when Linda had a gardening club meeting, she left the house for a short time. Upon returning, the house was eerily quiet. "Jessica? Oliver?" There was no answer. A note lay on the table. "I'm starting a new life. Please take care of Oliver. I hope you'll understand someday." Linda immediately called Jessica's cell phone, but it was turned off. Despite her panic, Linda waited all night. Perhaps Jessica had just gone out with Robert. Maybe she had taken Oliver with her. But by the next morning, there was still no sign of them, and Linda decided to contact the police. "Do you have a picture of your grandson?" the young officer asked. To be honest, if his mother took him, this becomes a family matter. Disappointed, Linda returned home and continued calling Jessica. She left voicemail messages and sent emails. There was no response. It was as if the two had vanished from the world. Late that night, the house phone rang. "Is this Mrs. Carter?" "This is Detective Johnson from the Colorado State Police." Linda clutched the receiver with trembling hands. "Your grandson, Oliver Carter, has been found in a forested area of the Rocky Mountains." "What?" Linda couldn't believe her ears. "What do you mean?" "A family camping reported finding a boy off the hiking trail. The boy identified himself as Oliver Carter and gave us your contact information. He's currently at Mountain View Police Station. Could you come immediately?" Linda drove to the police station at the foot of the mountain, committing a speeding violation for the first time in her life. As she drove the mountain road at night, her mind was filled with thoughts of Oliver. In the mountains. Why was Oliver in the mountains? What had Jessica done? When she arrived at the police station, a female officer was waiting. Her expression was stern, her voice low. "Mrs. Carter, your grandson was showing early symptoms of hypothermia, but his life is not in danger. He was truly fortunate. If campers hadn't come by." "Where is Oliver now?" "This way." As she entered the room she was led to, Linda's feet froze. Oliver was wrapped in a blanket, shivering in a chair. His clothes were muddy and torn, and he was missing one shoe. His face had scratches, and his eyes were swollen from crying. "Oliver." As Linda rushed over, Oliver looked up. When he saw his grandmother, he began to sob loudly. "Grandma." Linda embraced her grandson tightly. Oliver's small body was cold and still trembling. "It's okay now, everything's okay," Linda whispered through her tears. Oliver buried his face in his grandmother's chest and said in a shaking voice, "Mom." Mom said, "Because she has a new dad, she doesn't need me anymore." Those words shattered Linda's heart into 1,000 pieces. She held her grandson even tighter, wrapping around his small body protectively. According to the police officer, Oliver was found about 2 miles from the hiking trail in the forest. He had spent the entire night in the cold and fear. "I went for a drive with Mom and Uncle Robert," Oliver told the police. "We stopped the car halfway and they said, 'Let's take a walk in the forest.' But as we walked, Mom let go of my hand and said, 'Wait here for a bit.' But she never came back." Linda was bursting with anger and sadness. How could she believe that her daughter would abandon her own son in the mountains? The police began searching for Jessica and Robert, but they said the two had likely already left the state. "Take your grandson home," Detective Johnson said. "We've contacted Child Protective Services, but for now, it's best if you take care of him. We'll explain the legal procedures later." That night, after having Oliver examined at the hospital, Linda took him home. Oliver fell into a deep sleep, and Linda spent the whole night listening to his breathing, thinking about the path they would walk together from now on. As morning light filtered into the kitchen, Linda was making pancakes, Oliver's favorite. 3 months had passed since that terrible night. For the first few weeks, Oliver would wake up from nightmares in the middle of the night, calling for Linda in tears. The psychologist diagnosed him with abandonment trauma, and Linda was determined to do everything in her power to heal his emotional wounds. "Good morning, Oliver." Linda smiled as she saw her grandson coming down the stairs. Oliver was still somewhat quiet, but his expression had become brighter than before. "Good morning, Grandma," he smiled slightly. "I smelled pancakes." "That's right. I put plenty of blueberries in them." Linda had gone through legal procedures and formally became Oliver's guardian. There was still no trace of Jessica and Robert, but information had come in that they had married in Las Vegas. The police believed they should be charged with child abandonment, but Linda didn't wish to press criminal charges. All she wanted was a peaceful life with Oliver. After breakfast, Linda sat Oliver at the piano. A month ago, she had reopened a small piano school, and Oliver was taking lessons there along with other children. "Let's start a new piece today," Linda spread out the sheet music. "This is a piece by Bach called Invention. It's a bit difficult, but I know you can do it." Oliver looked at the sheet music with a serious expression. It seemed he could only open his heart when he was in touch with music. When he played the first few notes, a faint expression of joy appeared on his face. "Music is the language of the soul, Oliver," Linda said gently. "Sometimes when there are things you can't put into words, music can express them." Oliver nodded silently and let his fingers run over the keys again. Watching him, Linda made a promise in her heart: no matter what, she would protect this child's talent and heart. Time passed, and Oliver turned 7. A small birthday party was being held in the backyard of Linda's house. Friends from Pine Ridge Elementary School and students from the piano school gathered to celebrate Oliver's birthday. He had become less shy than before, but still didn't like standing out in large groups. "Let's cut the cake." Linda brought out a large chocolate cake. The candle flames reflected in Oliver's eyes as he looked up at Linda's face. "You make a wish before blowing them out," one of his friends said. Oliver thought for a moment, closed his eyes, and then blew out all the candles at once. The children cheered. "What did you wish for?" Linda asked later when they were alone. Oliver answered quietly, "That I could stay with Grandma forever." Linda felt a warmth in her chest. "Of course, Oliver. We'll always be together." That night, after Oliver had gone to sleep, Linda opened a letter from her lawyer. It stated that Jessica's whereabouts had been determined. She had apparently been spotted in Reno, Nevada. However, she had shown no indication of claiming custody of Oliver. Linda breathed a sigh of relief. She didn't harbor resentment against Jessica. She only wished for Oliver's peaceful life to continue. As the seasons changed, Oliver turned 10. His piano skills had improved remarkably, to the point where he was winning local music competitions. Linda continued teaching while supporting Oliver's musical activities. "Mrs. Carter, your grandson truly has talent," said Joseph Anderson, the director of the Colorado State School of Music, addressing Linda. After listening to Oliver's performance, he was recommending Oliver for a special junior program. "If he continues to develop his talent this way, a future as a concert pianist is not just a dream." Linda was filled with pride. But at the same time, as Oliver's talent grew, she also worried whether he could completely escape the shadows of his past. Oliver, returning home from school, was playing the piano in the living room while telling Linda about his day. He had grown taller and had developed into a boy with gentle eyes and a kind smile resembling Daniel's. "The teacher said I should try Beethoven's sonata. It looks difficult, but I want to give it a try." Linda nodded with a smile. "I'm sure you can do it. Just don't push yourself too hard." Oliver sat next to Linda and showed a hesitant expression. "Grandma, there's something I want to ask." "What is it?" "My mother. I sometimes remember Mom. I wonder where she is now." Linda caught her breath. She knew this moment would come someday. She placed her hand on Oliver's shoulder. "Your mother chose her own path. Sometimes, even adults make wrong choices. But having you here, being able to spend time with you, is the greatest gift to me." Oliver thought for a while, then slowly nodded. "I feel the same way. I'm happy to be with you, Grandma." Linda was relieved at those words. The wounds of the past might not have completely disappeared, but the bond they had built together had grown stronger than those wounds. Around his 12th birthday, Oliver began participating in a junior program at a renowned music school in the state. On weekends, he traveled to Denver for formal lessons. As a talented young pianist, his name gradually became known in the music world. "Grandma Linda," Oliver called during a break in practice. "Will you listen to this piece?" He began to play a piece that Linda had once taught Daniel. Linda felt her eyes grow hot with emotion. Oliver had a passion for music like his father, and his talent was blossoming even further. "Wonderful, Oliver," Linda applauded. "Your father must be so proud of you in heaven." At 13, Oliver was featured in the local newspaper as a young musical talent. The article included a photo of his concert and a brief interview. "My driving force is my grandmother. She taught me to love music and to never give up." Following that article, support from locals increased, and Oliver's concerts were always packed. His performances were praised not only for their technical accuracy but also for a depth of emotion that seemed beyond his young age. In the spring when Oliver turned 15, he was set to compete in a national young musicians competition. This competition was known as a gateway for talented youth. Just before the competition, Linda celebrated her birthday. Oliver took time from his practice to prepare a homemade dinner. "Happy birthday, Grandma," he placed a cake in front of Linda. "I've grown up thanks to you. That's why I want to give an especially good performance at this competition." Linda smiled as she gazed at her grandson. 10 years since that rainy night. They had overcome many difficulties and had now become an irreplaceable family. In her heart, Linda vowed to continue supporting Oliver's dreams. On the day of the competition, Linda stood by Oliver, encouraging him. Oliver appeared a bit nervous, but his eyes shone with determination. "I'm always proud of you, Oliver," Linda held his hand. "Whatever the outcome, I know you'll give your best performance." Oliver nodded and headed to the green room to prepare for his performance. Linda sat in the audience, reflecting on their journey. The small boy who had been abandoned in the mountains was now preparing to stand proudly on a national stage. Tears welled in her eyes. They were not tears of sadness, but of pride and love. Then, Oliver's name was announced. Oliver took a deep breath and nodded toward Linda. "I'll play for you, Grandma." As she watched Oliver walk onto the stage, Linda felt a warmth in her chest. It had been 10 years since that night he was abandoned in the mountains. That small, wounded soul now shone brightly. From the audience, a mixture of anticipation and tension could be felt. Notable musicians and instructors sat in the judges' seats, and scouts and music professionals could be seen throughout. Oliver bowed to the audience and sat at the piano. A moment of silence. Then, his fingers touched the keys. The moment the first note sounded, the atmosphere in the venue changed. Oliver had chosen Chopin's Ballade No. 1. He played this technically challenging piece as if weaving a story. In the passionate, intense parts, his fingers raced across the keys, and in the delicate, introspective parts, he created a stillness as if time had stopped. Linda sat at the edge of her seat, listening to her grandson's performance. Oliver's music reflected his own life. The sadness of his lost childhood, the terror of the night he was abandoned in the mountains, and the joy of finding a bond with a new family. The audience held their breath, drawn into his musical world. When the last note echoed through the hall, after a moment of silence, thunderous applause erupted. Several audience members stood up, shouting "Bravo!" Oliver bowed deeply and left the stage. Linda waited for Oliver in the green room. With the competition results scheduled to be announced in the evening, they had time to rest. "You were wonderful, Oliver," Linda embraced her grandson. "Your music reached everyone's hearts." Oliver smiled shyly. All that practice paid off. There was a knock, and the door opened. It was the competition director. "Mr. Carter, that was a magnificent performance," he said with shining eyes. "Representatives from several music schools would like to meet you." Oliver and Linda exchanged glances. This invitation meant that Oliver's talent had been officially recognized. With barely contained excitement, Oliver followed the director. Linda remained alone in the green room, organizing her grandson's belongings. She felt tired, but it was a happy exhaustion. The joy of witnessing her grandson's growth and success filled her heart. Suddenly, the door opened. "Oliver, are you back already?" When Linda turned around, an unfamiliar woman was standing there. "No, not unfamiliar." Linda caught her breath. After 10 years, her face had changed a little, but it was undoubtedly Jessica. "Hello, mother-in-law." Jessica's voice was lower and more refined than before. She was dressed in expensive designer clothes and wore perfectly applied makeup. However, in her eyes was the same calculating light that Linda remembered. "Jessica." Linda was at a loss for words. She hadn't seen her for 10 years. And now, On Oliver's day of glory, she had appeared. "Why are you here?" "I came to hear my son's performance," Jessica answered matter-of-factly. "It was wonderful. His talent is genuine." Linda felt anger rising within her. "For 10 years, you didn't show your face. You weren't there when Oliver was shivering in the mountains, when he was screaming from nightmares in the middle of the night." Jessica shrugged. "I was young and confused. Robert." She cut off her words. "But now it's different. I should have rights to my son." Just then, the door opened again, and Oliver returned. There was still excitement on his face. "Grandma, you won't believe it. The Juilliard teacher." His words stopped midway. Seeing the woman before him, Oliver's expression froze. Even after 10 years had passed, his mother's face had not disappeared from his memory. "Oliver." Jessica stepped forward and reached out her hand. "My son. I've come to get you." Linda, trembling with anger, stood protectively in front of Oliver. "You abandoned him in the mountains." Oliver remained silent. Complex emotions were crossing in his eyes. "I was young and confused then," Jessica made excuses. "But now it's different. I have a successful career. I can give you the life and education you deserve." Linda was about to argue, but Oliver gently touched her arm and stepped forward. "I remember," Oliver's voice was calm. "The moment in the darkness of the mountains when you let go of my hand. You said, 'Wait here for a bit,' and never came back." Jessica's face changed color. "Oliver, that was. I've always wondered why," Oliver continued. "Why a mother could abandon her child. And over a long time, I've come to understand. True family is determined not by blood ties, but by love." He turned back to Linda and showed a gentle smile. "Grandma Linda is my true family." Jessica pressed her lips together. "This is no time for sentimentality. Legally, I am your guardian. I've hired a lawyer. My career is going well, and I can provide an environment that will nurture your talent." Oliver looked at her calmly. "I'm no longer that 5-year-old child. I'm old enough to make my own choices." He stood beside Linda and took his grandmother's hand. "The 10 years I've spent with Grandma are my whole life. Grandma taught me not just music, but love and compassion as well." Jessica's face flushed red, and she retorted, "Legally, I am your guardian." But Oliver was no longer listening to her and turned his back. "Let's go, Grandma. It's time for the results announcement." Linda looked proudly at her grandson. He had grown. The wounded little soul was now a young man with a strong core. As they were about to leave the green room, Jessica threw one last comment. "Don't think this is over. I won't give up." Oliver didn't look back. In the solemn courtroom of the Colorado family court, on the wooden benches sat residents of Pine Ridge who supported Linda and Oliver. On the opposite side were Jessica in sophisticated attire and her team of expensive lawyers. Considering the future of a talented son, living with a young mother would be best, Jessica's lawyer argued. "Mrs. Carter is already 71. Does she have the physical strength left to support Oliver's education and future career?" Linda's lawyer stood up quietly. For 10 years, it was Linda Carter who raised Oliver. During that time, the defendant, Jessica Carter, never once made contact or paid child support. Standing at the witness stand, Oliver surveyed the entire courtroom. His eyes were calm, and his voice unwavering. "I remember that night," he began. "At 5 years old, I was left alone in the darkness of the mountains. I was cold, scared, and cried continuously." The courtroom fell silent. "But Grandma came for me. For the next 10 years, Grandma gave me love and security. It was Grandma who nurtured my musical talent and taught me what's important as a human being." Oliver looked straight at the judge. I am no longer a child. I should have the right to decide my own future. And I choose to live with my grandmother. On Judgment Day, the judge dismissed Jessica's custody claim. Considering the best interests of the child, I rule that Linda Carter, who has provided a stable environment, should continue to be Oliver's legal guardian. Jessica's face changed color, and she was discussing in hushed tones with her lawyer. The judge continued. Furthermore, for the crime of child abandonment, I sentence Jessica Carter to 3 years of probation. Linda and Oliver quietly embraced. Finally, they were freed from their long anxiety. 3 years later, in New York, 18-year-old Oliver had gained admission to Juilliard School of Music on a full scholarship. Linda had also moved to a small apartment in Manhattan to support her grandson's new life. "Grandma, today's rehearsal went well," Oliver reported as soon as he got home. "I've been selected as the soloist for next month's concert." Linda proudly watched her grandson's growth. The small boy who had trembled in the mountains was now preparing to spread his wings to the world. On the day of the concert, Oliver performed Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto. The audience was captivated by his passionate performance and gave him a standing ovation. After the curtain call, Oliver noticed a woman standing at the back of the auditorium. It was Jessica. After the concert, he approached her. "You came." Jessica had lost some weight, and her previous glamour had faded. "That was a wonderful performance," she said quietly. "I don't hate you," Oliver said. "But we can't go back to the past. I'm going to walk my own path from now on." Jessica nodded slightly, then quietly left the venue. Linda and Oliver held hands as they walked through the New York night under a starry sky. The bond they had built was a testament to true family, beyond blood ties. "Grandma," Oliver said, looking up at the night sky. "Thank you for giving me a real family." Linda smiled. Neither her life nor her journey with her grandson was over yet. New adventures awaited them.